A Pal for Gary is one of those SpongeBob SquarePants episodes that has become infamous among fans, but not for the usual reasons. The episode begins with SpongeBob SquarePants happily getting ready for work at the Krusty Krab.
See you later, Gare.
As he leaves the house, he notices his pet snail, Gary, looking somewhat bored and lonely. SpongeBob, concerned that Gary might be lonely while he's away at work, reassures Gary that everything will be fine, and he heads off to the Krusty Krab.
I can only imagine the tortured loneliness he must be feeling right now.
At work, SpongeBob continues to worry about Gary being alone at home. Now, anyone else might just buy a nice chew toy or maybe a comfy new bed for their pet. But not SpongeBob. No, he decides the best way to keep Gary happy is to bring home a new friend, a decision that's about as well thought out as leaving Patrick in charge of a science experiment. This thought preoccupies SpongeBob for the rest of his shift, and he resolves to get a friend for Gary as soon as he finishes work. After work, SpongeBob heads straight to the local pet store to find the perfect friend for Gary. The pet
So precious. Sold! I'll take that one right there.
The shop owner gives SpongeBob a vague warning about Puffy Fluffy, suggesting that the creature may not be as innocent as it looks.
These creatures can be very unstable, especially around other pets.
However, SpongeBob is too excited to listen to the warning and quickly purchases Puffy Fluffy, convinced that it will make the perfect companion for Gary. Honestly, the shopkeeper might as well have added, "What could possibly go wrong?" because that's basically the setup for what's about to unfold. SpongeBob arrives home and eagerly introduces Gary to his new friend. Gary, however, is immediately frightened and suspicious of Puffy Fluffy. Gary hisses and backs away, clearly uncomfortable, but SpongeBob misinterprets Gary's reaction as jealousy or shyness. It's like SpongeBob's pet parent intuition took a day off, leaving poor Gary to deal with the world's worst playdate. SpongeBob, thinking everything will be fine, leaves the two alone and heads off to bed. As soon as SpongeBob is out of sight, Puffy Fluffy undergoes a terrifying transformation. The once tiny and harmless creature morphs into a gigantic, monstrous version of itself, complete with sharp teeth and menacing tentacles. Puffy Fluffy begins terrorizing Gary, chasing him around the house and wreaking havoc. Gary tries to defend himself, but Puffy Fluffy is relentless, turning the house into a disaster zone. Meanwhile, SpongeBob is blissfully unaware, probably dreaming of jellyfishing or something equally oblivious.
You making meatballs, Grandma? Time for dinner already?
The next morning, SpongeBob wakes up, completely oblivious to the destruction that took place overnight. He finds the house in shambles, with furniture overturned and the walls scratched up.
My clothes! This was no random seaquake. Who could have done this?
SpongeBob, however, doesn't suspect Puffy Fluffy at all. Instead, he assumes that Gary caused the mess out of jealousy.
Gary, I bet he's jealous about the new friend. Gary, you are in big trouble, mister!
He walks in on the chaotic scene just in time to see the monstrous Puffy Fluffy attacking Gary.
Gary!
But even then, SpongeBob continues to scold Gary for provoking Puffy Fluffy, completely misinterpreting the situation.
You put Fluffy down right now! Bad boy, Gary! Bad boy!
SpongeBob gives Gary a stern talking to about being a better friend, which, coming from the guy who brought a monster home, feels a bit rich. If there were an award for most clueless pet owner, SpongeBob would win it hands down.
Are you a friend of Fluffy? What's going on? Okay, now this is starting to hurt.
Puffy Fluffy, now fully enraged, attempts to attack SpongeBob as well, but Gary bravely defends him. Gary manages to fend off Puffy Fluffy and forces it to retreat, saving both himself and SpongeBob. SpongeBob, still not fully understanding what happened, praises Gary for finally making friends with Puffy Fluffy. not realizing that Gary was protecting him the entire time. Now, let's take a moment to dive into what the fans think about this episode because, oh boy, a pal for Gary definitely stirred up some strong reactions. SpongeBuddy Mania user SB Roxman writes, "I'm not sure what my opinion on this episode is. I don't hate any episode of the show, but SpongeBob was definitely a jerk in this episode. The storyline has been done many times before, where a bad person causes trouble and the good guy gets the blame, but usually the bad guy gets caught in the end. I felt sorry for Gary when he was about to be eaten, and all SpongeBob did was tell Gary off. Then, of course, Gary saves SpongeBob's life, and he blames Gary for the whole thing. I know SpongeBob can be oblivious at times, but not that oblivious." Another user shares the same sentiment, writing, "One of the absolute worst episodes I've ever seen in a long time. This episode is too awful to be in Season 7. Not only was SpongeBob a complete jerk, but that puffy fluff creature was disgusting." Finally, user Spongy Material says, "I hate this episode. SpongeBob was being such a meanie, and Gary was almost eaten by Puffy Fluffy. This is my most hated episode of the entire series." Similar fan reactions can be found on IMDb, where one user writes, "The episode is terrible. The destruction of the personality of the characters of SpongeBob in that episode was notorious, and the little creativity together with a loose writing made an aberrational episode, and that only dishonors the legacy of SpongeBob." Another user writes, "A pal for Gary is freaking horrendous. In fact, I'd consider it the worst SpongeBob episode out there. Gary is tortured for no reason, SpongeBob is completely oblivious and annoying, and Puffy Fluffy is one of the scariest things I've ever seen from this show. This episode is so sadistic to Gary, it makes you wonder if this episode was made by Satan. So overall, it is one of the worst episodes of any Nickelodeon show I've ever seen. So whenever you see A Pal for Gary on TV, either change the channel, turn off your TV, or smash your TV. I don't understand how this episode got a 3.7 rating. It deserves a 1.0, but even that's pushing it." And then finally, a third IMDb user's review is just, "When a pal for Gary comes on the TV, I turn it off. This review is too short, so I guess I gotta add to it." In the end, A Pal for Gary remains a divisive episode in the SpongeBob series. While it was intended to be a light-hearted story about SpongeBob trying to do something nice for Gary, it ended up pushing the character into territory that didn't sit well with many fans. Whether you see it as an interesting departure from the usual formula or just a misstep, there's no doubt that this episode has left a lasting impression, if not exactly for the reasons the creators might have hoped. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this and want more, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you stick around for more SpongeBob videos. See you in the next one.